The glittering era of Hollywood's golden age came at an invisible but deadly cost. Behind the shimmering lights, glamorous red carpet premieres, and glossy fan magazine spreads lay a silent killer that claimed the lives of some of the most iconic figures in cinema history. Cigarettes were as essential to the Hollywood image as tuxedos and satin gowns. On screen, smoking represented allure, mystery, and sophistication, but for the stars who made it look irresistible, it became a habit that led to devastating consequences. This exploration looks at 13 legendary actors whose extraordinary lives and careers were cut short by lung cancer and smoking-related illnesses. These were not just stars, they were cultural forces whose talent helped define cinematic art. Their tragic ends stand as somber reminders of how deeply the tobacco industry embedded itself into Hollywood's image, leaving behind a trail of suffering beneath the silver screen glamour. Humphrey Bogart, the man who epitomized smoking cool, is perhaps the most famous cinematic smoker of all time. His trench coat, fedora, and ever-present cigarette formed an image of rugged sophistication that countless men tried to emulate. Unfortunately, that same image led to his untimely death. Bogart's smoking wasn't an act. It was an inseparable part of who he was. Throughout his career, he consumed 4 to 5 packs a day, roughly 80 to 100 cigarettes daily. Directors often had to adjust filming schedules to accommodate his constant need for smoke breaks. Bogey didn't just smoke in movies, recalled director John Huston. He lived with a cigarette. It wasn't a prop, it was part of him. I don't think I ever saw him without one. His most memorable performances in films like Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, and The Big Sleep cemented the image of the cigarette as a symbol of cool detachment and world-weary cynicism. But by 1956, the toll became apparent when Bogart was diagnosed with esophageal cancer at 56. The disease spread quickly to his lungs, and despite surgeries and experimental treatments, his condition worsened. He lost over 80 pounds, fading into a frail shadow of his once commanding screen presence. Yet even in his final days, he retained his characteristic dry wit. He passed away in January 1957 with his wife, Lauren Bacall, by his side. The tragedy of Bogart's death lies in how inseparably his image was tied to the habit that killed him. The very act that defined his cinematic coolness caused his downfall. As film historian Robert Osborne observed, Bogart made smoking look so effortlessly essential to masculinity that countless fans took up the habit, many suffering the same fate. Bogart's legacy remains immortal, but so does the bitter irony that the symbol of his cinematic strength was also the source of his greatest weakness. John Wayne the Duke was the embodiment of toughness and American grit on and off the screen. For 5 decades, he portrayed fearlessness, battling outlaws, fighting wars, and conquering the wilderness. But off-screen, he faced an enemy no gunfighter could defeat, lung cancer born of decades of heavy smoking. The amount of cigarettes Wayne smoked was immense, often over 5 packs a day, well over 100 cigarettes. Sometimes he added cigars to the mix. In 1964, he was diagnosed with lung cancer at the age of 57. Surgeons removed his entire left lung and several ribs. The surgery saved his life, but it permanently weakened his stamina, an immense challenge for an actor known for physically demanding roles. Even climbing stairs or riding horses became arduous tasks, remembered director Andrew McLaglen, yet Wayne pressed on, refusing to let the public see any weakness. He continued smoking, though less than before, through his ordeal. A decade later, in the late 1970s, the cancer returned, spreading through his body. In a haunting coincidence, his final film, The Shootist 1976, had him playing a dying gunfighter battling cancer. By the time it was released, Wayne was visibly deteriorating but kept up a stoic public persona. John wasn't going to let anyone see him as weak, a close friend said. John Wayne died on June 11, 1979, at 72. The official cause was stomach cancer, but the doctors confirmed it had metastasized from his earlier lung cancer. His family later founded the John Wayne Cancer Foundation, which still funds cancer research and awareness today. As one colleague said, The Duke faced down every enemy except the one he invited into his lungs every day. Not even John Wayne's legendary strength was a match for the damage caused by a lifetime of smoking. Steve McQueen, dubbed the King of Cool, embodied rebellion and masculine charisma. His minimalist acting style and quiet intensity made him one of the defining figures of 1960s and 70s cinema. Yet even McQueen's tough exterior couldn't protect him from the consequences of his own habits. His relationship with cigarettes began in his troubled youth and grew during his service in the Marines. By the height of his fame, he smoked 2 packs a day, using cigarettes on screen to underline his character's independence and detachment. Steve used cigarettes like punctuation marks, said director Norman Joyson, who worked with him on the Thomas Crown Affair. He could express more with a single drag or exhale than many actors could with dialogue. Off-screen, McQueen's smoking was relentless, during breaks, meals, and even while racing cars and motorcycles. This combination of tobacco smoke and exhaust fumes doubled his exposure to carcinogens. In 1978, he began experiencing severe respiratory issues and chronic coughing, which he initially ignored. By 1980, his symptoms worsened, and he was diagnosed with mesothelioma, a rare cancer of the lung lining. While asbestos exposure from his Marine days and racing suits was the primary cause, doctors agreed his heavy smoking accelerated its progress. Oncologist Dr. Karen Reynolds explained that in such cases, smoking doesn't just add risk, it multiplies it. Desperate for hope, McQueen turned to unconventional treatments in Mexico, which showed brief improvement but ultimately failed. In November 1980, he underwent surgery to remove tumors from his neck and abdomen, but he died shortly after from cardiac arrest at just 50 years old. For fans, his death shattered the illusion of invincibility surrounding him. The man who performed his own stunts and personified rugged resilience was, in the end, as human and fragile as anyone else. As film historian David Thompson noted, McQueen's decline revealed a tragic irony, the ultimate icon of vitality undone by the same self-destructive force that had long been part of his identity. Yul Brynner, the magnetic star who made baldness both exotic and fashionable, left behind one of the most haunting anti-smoking messages ever recorded. Known worldwide for his commanding portrayal of the King of Siam in The King and I, a role he performed over 4,600 times, Brynner's regal presence masked a heavy smoking addiction. Throughout much of his life, he smoked up to 5 packs a day, making cigarettes part of his on-screen mystique. Actress Deborah Kerr, his co-star in The King and I, recalled how Brynner's cigarette became part of his persona. The way he held it, the way he exhaled, it was all part of his mystery. But the addiction caught up with him in 1983 when he was diagnosed with lung cancer. He immediately quit smoking, a decision he later wished he had made decades earlier. Knowing he had little time left, Brynner used his final months to warn others. In 1985, he recorded a public service announcement for the American Cancer Society, released posthumously after his death on October 10th of that year. In it, he looked directly at the camera and said, "Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, don't smoke." The message became one of the most powerful anti-smoking campaigns ever made. A representative from the Cancer Society noted, Yul's final performance was his most important. His message reached millions, helping many to quit or never start. Cultural historian Neil Gabler later reflected that Brynner's final act was as powerful as any of his stage roles, transforming his personal tragedy into a profound warning. The man who once made baldness a symbol of style spent his last breath exposing the stark, unglamorous reality of smoking-induced cancer. In doing so, Yul Brynner turned his death into one final unforgettable performance, one that saved lives long after his own had ended. Nat King Cole was one of America's most unique and beloved performers, known as the Velvet Voice. His smooth, velvety baritone gave timeless life to such classics as Unforgettable, Mona Lisa, and The Christmas Song. More than a singer, Cole was a trailblazer. He was the first African-American man to host his own national television show. Yet the voice that brought so much joy to millions was silenced far too soon by lung cancer, a direct result of his lifelong smoking habit. As many said, He sang like a dream, but smoked like a nightmare. Cole's relationship with cigarettes was both professional and deeply personal. He was seldom seen, without one on stage, in the studio, or in private life, sometimes smoking as many as 3 packs a day, roughly 60 cigarettes. Smoking became part of his rhythm. He would light another cigarette between songs during recording sessions and live shows alike. According to Capitol Records producer Lee Gillette, Cole sincerely felt cigarettes improved his sound, saying the smoke gave his voice that raspy texture that made it so distinctive. In the studio, he needed a cigarette as much as he needed the microphone itself. Tragic as it was, the very habit he believed perfected his craft was quietly destroying the gift that had made him a legend. In the early 1960s, Nat Cole began to experience hoarseness and shortness of breath that interfered with his singing. Dismissing these as temporary setbacks, he continued with a demanding schedule and heavy smoking. Late in 1964, his health collapsed during a performance at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, and doctors soon after confirmed advanced lung cancer that already had spread throughout his body. The diagnosis was terminal. Photographer Phil Stern recalled the collective feeling of shock. He seemed so full of life. The thought of someone like Nat dying was impossible to accept. Despite intensive cobalt therapy and surgery, his health deteriorated rapidly, forcing him to cancel many appearances. He recorded his last studio sessions in mid-1964, struggling to complete vocals for what would be his last album, Love. Those in the studio remembered his gasping for air and fighting coughing fits, though the finished record showed no trace of his suffering, a testament to his discipline and professionalism. Nat King Cole died on February 15, 1965, at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, just 3 weeks after his 45th birthday. The music world was devastated by the loss. Many believed that if he had not smoked, he might have gone on to create for another 30 or 40 years. Although his life was shortened, his output was staggering. Nearly 700 recorded songs and more than 50 million records sold. His legacy is foundational to American popular music. As music historian Ted Gioia said, "What's heartbreaking about Nat's death is the music we never got to hear." Had he lived into the 1970s and beyond, who knows what new directions his artistry might have taken. The cigarettes that Cole felt gave character to his voice ultimately silenced it forever. His death remains one of the most sobering reminders of smoking's deadly grip on even the brightest stars. William Talman, remembered by millions as the perpetually defeated prosecutor Hamilton Berger on Perry Mason, found himself fighting a real-life battle he could not win: lung cancer caused by years of heavy smoking. For 9 seasons, television audiences watched his character lose every courtroom case to Raymond Burr's Perry Mason. But in his personal life, Talman faced a far more tragic verdict. Unlike most actors who kept their illnesses private, Talman confronted his disease publicly, becoming the first actor to film an anti-smoking public service announcement while dying from lung cancer. This brave act turned a respected character actor into a powerful advocate whose final message continues to echo decades later. A lifelong smoker, Talman smoked 2 to 3 packs daily, 40 to 60 cigarettes, and considered it a normal part of adulthood. That illusion shattered in January 1968, when doctors diagnosed him with terminal lung cancer at 53. By then, it had spread to his liver, bones, and brain. With only months to live, Talman made an extraordinary choice. He contacted the American Cancer Society and volunteered to appear in a PSA to warn others about the dangers of smoking, using his own death as proof. Filmed while he was visibly frail, the message remains one of the most powerful anti-smoking statements ever broadcast. Sitting beside his wife and children, Talman faced the camera and said, "I'm William Talman. You know me as the losing prosecutor on Perry Mason. But today, I'm asking for a verdict that truly matters. To you, to your children. I've got lung cancer. If you smoke, quit. Don't be a loser." The PSA aired after his death on August 30, 1968, reaching millions of viewers. It was among the first times a celebrity used their final moments to deliver a life-saving message, inspiring others, such as Yul Brynner, to do the same later. Raymond Burr remembered, Bill knew he was dying when he filmed that message. He was in agony, but he wanted to use his time left to save others. Public health expert Dr. Sarah Marshall later noted that its effectiveness lay in its raw sincerity. Viewers saw a man facing his mortality, surrounded by the family he was about to lose. Though Hamilton Berger lost every fictional case, William Talman's final case, the fight against smoking, proved to be his most triumphant verdict. William Powell, the embodiment of refined humor in the Thin Man series, brought charm and effortless sophistication to the screen. Alongside Myrna Loy, he became part of one of Hollywood's most beloved on-screen duos. Yet behind that suave exterior lay a smoking habit that eventually eroded his health and vitality. His screen persona often included a cigarette, enhancing his image of urbane wit. Off-camera, he was equally dedicated to the habit, smoking 1 to 2 packs daily, 20 to 40 cigarettes. Director W.S. Van Dyke recalled, Bill smoked with the same grace he brought to everything. But between takes, he'd sometimes be coughing when he thought no one was listening. In 1938, Powell was diagnosed with rectal cancer. Though not directly caused by smoking, the harsh radiation treatments weakened his body significantly. After 3 years of treatment and recovery, he returned to acting, but his health was never the same. Despite recurring respiratory issues, he never gave up smoking. By the 1950s, lung complications worsened, and his doctors warned him that his long-term tobacco use was compounding the effects of his earlier cancer treatments. He retired in 1955 at 63, largely due to poor health. The final decades of his life were marked by emphysema and heart disease, conditions closely tied to smoking. Lauren Bacall later remembered, the man who had been so full of life could barely walk across a room without losing his breath. Powell died on March 5, 1984, at 91, a long life by most standards, but one shadowed by years of illness. His official cause of death was heart failure, though emphysema and complications related to smoking played major roles. As film historian James Harvey related, the cigarette was part of his elegance, just like the martini glass. But the image that defined him also destroyed him. Pulmonologist Dr. Richard Kainer summarized Powell's story best. Sometimes smoking's damage isn't measured in years lost, but in breath lost. Though Powell's life was long, the quality of those final years was tragically diminished by the habit that had once symbolized his sophistication. Known for his intense portrayal of General Patton and powerful performances in The Hustler and Dr. Strangelove, George C. Scott brought intensity to every role he played. His voice was deep and raspy, instantly recognizable, but it was also the byproduct of decades of heavy smoking that would cripple his health. A lifelong smoker, Scott started smoking as a young man and continued, often consuming 2 to 3 packs daily. Director Franklin Schaffner recalled, George attacked every cigarette like a scene he had to conquer. It wasn't casual, it was compulsive. By the 1980s, Scott suffered from severe emphysema, a disease that destroys the lungs' air sacs and makes breathing painfully difficult. During the filming of Taps in 1981, co-star Timothy Hutton noticed his struggle. He'd get short of breath just walking and talking. They started adjusting his scenes so he could sit down. Despite repeated attempts, he couldn't quit. His wife, actress Trish Van de Vere, admitted he knew what cigarettes were doing to him. But even that knowledge couldn't make him stop. By the 1990s, Scott required oxygen between performances and accepted fewer roles. He died on September 22, 1999, at 71 from a ruptured aortic aneurysm, with emphysema listed as a contributing factor. Dr. Elena Martinez later explained that the chronic coughing from his lung disease may have worsened the aneurysm, hastening his death. As theater director Peter Wood observed, the cigarettes that helped shape his iconic voice ultimately destroyed it. Scott's final years stood as a grim reminder of smoking's capacity to erode not just health, but the very essence of an artist's craft. Jean Hagen, so brilliant in her comedic role of shrill-voiced Lena Lamont in Singin' in the Rain, endured one of Hollywood's cruelest ironies. The actress who played the role of a woman driven crazy by her execrable voice had a beautiful speaking voice to begin with, which she would indeed lose to throat and lung cancer due to smoking. off-screen, Hagen was a heavy smoker, going through 1 to 2 packs a day. According to Stanley Donen, between takes, she would light up a cigarette, the effect being almost immediate, as that nasal screech would morph into her refined voice. Her role in Singin' in the Rain earned her an Oscar nomination and lasting fame, but by the mid-1970s, years of smoking caught up with her. Diagnosed with throat cancer, she endured a tragic decline as her voice faded. It was heartbreaking, remembered actor Keenan Wynn. The woman with the most beautiful natural voice was reduced to whispers. The cancer eventually spread to her lungs, and she passed away on August 29, 1977, at only 54. Historian Janine Basinger later lamented, Jean Hagen was just entering the richest phase of her career. The roles she could have played in her 60s and beyond were lost forever. The woman whose on-screen character lost her career to her voice was, in life, silenced by the same cigarettes that had accompanied her success. Jack Cassidy, with his striking looks, rich voice, and undeniable charisma, seemed destined for Hollywood superstardom. Known for his television guest roles and Broadway successes, he was the patriarch of a show business dynasty that included his sons David and Sean Cassidy. Yet his promising career was abruptly and tragically ended by a fire likely caused by the cigarettes he smoked incessantly. Cassidy lived fast, smoked faster, and ultimately died in the blaze he unintentionally set himself. A lifelong 2 to 3 packs a day smoker, Cassidy was also an alcoholic. His ex-wife Shirley Jones remembered, Jack always had a cigarette in his hand, during rehearsals, meals, even while learning lines. Friends often warned him about the danger of falling asleep with a lit cigarette, as he had already caused small fires several times. On December 12, 1976, those fears became reality. After a night of drinking, Cassidy fell asleep on his couch with a cigarette burning. His West Hollywood apartment soon went up in flames. Firefighters found him near the door, overcome by smoke. He was just 49. Investigators concluded that it was almost certainly caused by a cigarette. Fire safety expert Robert Williams described his death as the deadly convergence of smoking and alcohol. The timing was particularly tragic. Cassidy's career had just started to shift toward darker, more complex roles, showing promise of a remarkable second act. Entertainment journalist Tom Carson remembered he was finally breaking free of the lightweight image and proving his depth as an actor. His future could have been extraordinary. Instead, that fire, fed by cigarettes, ended his life and promise. As Carson so poignantly described, Jack burned brightly, consuming everything around him. He lived like fire, and in the end, fire took him.